Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving back into some entitled people stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who thought the world revolved around them and discovered it doesn't. Here we go. She knocked over her drink, soaked my wife, and pretended it didn't happen. A couple weeks ago, my wife and I went to see Wu-Tang Clan at Madison Square Garden. We've been looking forward to it for months. We had decent seats, great energy around us, and the kind of crowd you expect at a legendary hip-hop show, loud, hyped, and ready to rap every word. The trio in front of us caught our attention early on. It was an odd mix, 2 middle-aged folks who looked like they'd been fans since the 90s, and a woman in her 30s who I'm guessing was their daughter. The older 2 were vibing in a laid-back way. The daughter, on the other hand, was performing like she thought she was headlining the encore. Every 5 minutes, she had her phone out, filming selfie videos with exaggerated facial expressions and dramatic dance moves, which honestly fine. It's 2024, people document everything. But she wasn't just dancing, she was flinging herself around with wild, unpredictable arm swings like she was summoning spirits. That's when things went sideways. She'd placed her oversized beer cup on her seat behind her while she danced. My wife's seat was directly behind that when about 60 seconds after setting it down, she spun around mid-prophecy, clipped the cup with her elbow, and launched it backward. The beer dumped straight onto my wife's feet and filled one of her shoes halfway. It splashed across the row and hit my buddy sitting next to her, too. My wife froze, then looked down at her soaked shoe. Beer was pooling on the floor under her seat. My buddy just blinked at his jeans in disbelief. The woman turned around, wide-eyed for a split second. You could see the exact moment she processed what had happened. Then, instead of saying a single word, she turned back around and resumed dancing like nothing occurred. No apology, no, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," nothing. That was the part that got me. Accidents happen. It's a packed concert, drink spill, but ignoring it completely, watching someone you just soaked in beer and pretending you didn't see it, that's a choice. I picked up the cup. It still had about half a beer left inside thanks to the partially sealed lid. I popped the lid off carefully. My wife looked at me and said quietly, "Don't." I gave her a look that said I absolutely was going to. The next time the dancer launched into one of her windmill routines, I tipped the cup forward and poured the remaining beer directly into her seat cushion. I made sure to let it soak in deep. Foam cushions are incredibly absorbent. For good measure, a little splash rolled down the front edge onto her shoes. She felt it. She turned around just as I finished emptying the cup and caught me holding it upside down. I gave her the most polite customer service smile I could manage. She stared for a second, then, just like before, she chose to pretend it wasn't happening. That was the funniest part. She knew. I knew she knew. But she'd already committed to the strategy of denial, and she wasn't about to pivot now. That's the move. She chose to ignore her own accident. You chose to return the favor in a way that was impossible to ignore. And then you smiled. She couldn't acknowledge it without admitting she'd seen you do it, which meant admitting she'd seen the whole chain of events. Her own silence trapped her. When the music slowed and the older couple sat down, she hesitated awkwardly. She hovered for a second like she'd forgotten how chairs worked. The guy next to her, father, boyfriend, who knows, grabbed her arm and pulled her down into the seat. The second she sat, beer oozed out of the cushion like it had been waiting for this exact moment. It soaked straight through her jeans. She shot up instantly, gasping, twisting around like she'd been electrocuted. From our row, it was impossible not to notice the dark stain spreading from her waistband down past her knees. The man tried to pull her back down again, confused about why she was standing. She resisted for a second, then got tugged halfway into the seat again before springing back up. He looked annoyed, assuming she was just being dramatic. She couldn't explain it without admitting she'd spilled beer all over my wife and gotten repaid. So she just stood there for most of the rest of the show. Every time the 2 beside her sat down, she awkwardly hovered until the guy grabbed her arm again and tried to pull her into the seat-soaked cushion. Each time she popped back up like the seat had betrayed her personally. My wife, who'd been pretty annoyed earlier, leaned toward me and whispered, "Okay, that's kind of worth it." Her shoe was still damp, but the mood had shifted. The dancer never looked back at us again, not once. She kept filming her videos, just noticeably more stationary now. No more summoning rituals. By the time the encore rolled around, she'd given up sitting entirely. She stood stiffly, arms tucked in, doing small shoulder movements instead of full-body flails. On the way out, my buddy clapped me on the back and said, "I've never seen instant karma delivered so neatly." It wasn't life-changing revenge. Nobody got escorted out, no dramatic confrontation, just a wet seat and a silent standoff. But I'll admit, watching someone commit so hard to pretending nothing happened, even as beer soaked through her jeans, was oddly satisfying. And my wife, she got a laugh out of it in the end, which made the whole thing worth the price of admission. And our second story. You should have told me she was wealthy. My wife, after discovering my cousin's net worth, I thought it was obvious from the banner at the park. I'm 31. My wife, Hannah, is 34. We've been married about a year and a half, together for 3. My cousin, Lila, is 33 and married to her husband, Grant, who's 35. They own one of the biggest farms in our county. And if you ask anyone around here, that farm is basically Lila's firstborn child. Now, here's the part most people don't know unless they're family. When Lila was in her early 20s, she won what can only be described as generational, don't ever need to work again money. I'm talking the kind of payout that makes financial advisors sweat, the kind that, if managed correctly, means your grandkids are set. She managed it correctly. She paid for her siblings' college educations. She set up a fund so every kid in the extended family, including any children I might have someday, can go to college without loans. She donates heavily to the community, but quietly. The new park in town, she matched every dollar raised. The school's recent renovations, same story. There's even a banner at the park fence listing local donors, including Grant's welding business and their farm. But if you saw Lila at the grocery store, you'd never guess. She drives a Bronco Grant bought her when their youngest was born. Otherwise, she's in the farm truck that looks like it survived 3 wars. Mud on the tires, hay in the back, boots always dusty. If she's wearing jewelry, it's practical. The farm's paid off. Grant makes excellent money as a pipe welder. The farm itself brings in serious income. The lottery winnings, largely untouched except for investments and the occasional piece of specialized equipment. They live well, but they don't advertise it. Hannah and I do fine. She's a nurse practitioner in a specialty field and makes very good money. I work in aviation and bring in about the same. Compared to most folks around here, we're comfortable. Nice house, nice cars, vacations when we want. We are not, however, in Lila's tax bracket. Hannah's proud of what she's accomplished, which I respect. She worked hard for her degrees, but she also has a habit of reminding people how well she's doing. She likes designer bags. She likes to talk about her salary. She prefers the best of the best, as she puts it. 99% of my family can't stand that about her. They won't say it out loud because they're polite and because they love me, but I see the look sometimes when she brings up income in casual conversation or when she casually asks what someone does and you can hear the implied follow-up, "Is it impressive enough?" Recently, another cousin got married. They decided to hold the wedding at Lila's farm. She's got this massive barn near a pond, and they cleared it out, strung lights across the beams, set up tables, the whole thing. It was honestly one of the most beautiful weddings I've ever seen. That was the first time Hannah had ever been out there. For reasons I still don't understand, she thought Lila just had a little hobby farm, like a couple goats and a vegetable patch. I never realized she believed that. I've mentioned before that most of our beef and produce comes from Lila, but I usually pick it up myself. The moment we pulled up the long driveway and the house came into view, Hannah went quiet. The house isn't gaudy. It's not a mansion with columns and fountains, but it's big, custom-built, perfectly maintained. The barns are newer than most commercial buildings in town. The equipment parked out back costs more than our cars combined. During the reception, I noticed Hannah scanning everything, the lighting, the landscaping, the size of the property. At one point, she leaned toward me and whispered, "Since when does your cousin have money?" I blinked. "She's always had money." "You never told me that." I didn't think it needed explaining. She didn't say anything else then, but I could see something simmering. Later in the evening, she made a comment to Lila about how it must be nice to have land like this. Lila just laughed and said, "It's a lot of work, but we love it." Then she excused herself to go check on the caterers. On the drive home, it exploded. "You embarrassed me," Hannah said, arms crossed, staring out the window. "How?" "You let me think she was poor." "I didn't let you think anything. You assumed. You should have told me she was wealthy. It's not a secret, I said. She paid for half the town's projects. There's a banner at the park we drive past every week. That's business branding. I didn't realize she was that rich. I kept my eyes on the road. Why does it matter? Because I looked stupid. No, I said carefully. You looked surprised. She turned toward me. Everyone probably thinks I'm an idiot. No one was thinking about you that much. That didn't go over well. The argument carried into the house. She accused me of setting her up, of making her feel small in front of my family. I finally snapped and said, "You embarrassed yourself." She's like, "WTF? You treat people like they're beneath you," I continued. You talk about money constantly. You assume if someone isn't flashy, they're struggling. There are people in this town who make as much or more than we do. They just don't feel the need to announce it. She went quiet after that. The next morning, she doubled down. It's weird you never clarified. It's weird you care this much. She hasn't let it go. She says I should have prepared her, that I made her look foolish by omission. I told her flat out that if someone's sense of worth is tied to thinking they're the most successful person in the room, that's not something I can fix for her. This is the real conversation. It's not about Lila's money. It's about Hannah realizing she's not the only successful person in the room, and that her whole way of measuring people by what they flash doesn't work here. Lila doesn't need to prove anything. That's what's eating at her, not embarrassment, the loss of a competition she invented. Lila hasn't said a word about it. She hasn't acted any differently toward Hannah. In fact, she dropped off a cooler of steaks 2 days later like nothing happened. But the tension's there at home. Hannah keeps saying she feels bitter about the whole thing, that she didn't realize other people in the family were on that level. I told her the level isn't the point. Most of them just don't need applause for existing. At the end of the day, Lila's wealth isn't loud, it's steady. It builds schools and parks. It funds educations quietly. She doesn't need to flex it at weddings. Hannah, on the other hand, is still trying to win a competition no one else is playing. And if there's anything I've learned from this, it's that the people who have the most don't usually feel the need to prove it. And our last story. The smell of money. My neighbors moved to the country and discovered it smells like country. I helped them learn by expanding my hog operation. When my wife and I bought our place, we were very deliberate about where we landed. 5 acres, zoned agricultural, gravel road, no HOA, and no one hovering over us with a clipboard measuring grass height. I grew up around farms, and I've always liked the rhythm of it. Early mornings, diesel engines warming up in the cold, the smell of soil and livestock. That's not a nuisance to me, that's home. The property had been part of a larger farming operation decades ago, and while it had been subdivided, the zoning never changed. That mattered to me. Agricultural zoning means you can actually use your land for agriculture without begging permission from a committee that just discovered composting last year. For the first year or so, it was quiet and easy. Then the house next door sold. You could tell immediately they weren't from around here. Fresh sod, decorative gravel borders, a brand new SUV that had never seen a dirt road in its life. During their first week, I overheard them talking about how excited they were for peace and quiet and country charm. What they really meant, as it turned out, was that they wanted the view of farmland without any of the farming part. Their daughter was the most vocal, early 20s, constantly blasting music in the driveway, giving me exaggerated sighs whenever I drove the tractor past. One afternoon, one of my cows slipped through a weak stretch of fence and wandered into their yard. She wasn't charging or anything, just grazing calmly like cows tend to do. I walked over with a lead rope and started guiding her back. The daughter stood there with her arms crossed and said, "You need to respect property boundaries." I blinked at her. She found a soft spot in the fence. I'm fixing it. "This is exactly why we didn't want to live next to Livestock," she shot back. I bit my tongue. I fixed the fence that same day, reinforced the posts, and made sure it wouldn't happen again. No thank you, just glares. After that, every normal farm sound seemed to irritate them. The tractor at 7 a.m. in planting season, the occasional moo, even the smell after a rainstorm. One evening, the daughter told me very seriously that I needed to be more considerate of residential living on agricultural land. I didn't argue, I just nodded and said, "All right, have it your way." Now, here's the thing about agricultural zoning. If you read the county code, which I have cover to cover, there are specific allowances for livestock. Cattle, chickens, goats, and yes, hogs. Up to a certain number, no special hearing required. As long as you follow setback rules and waste management regulations, you're in the clear. I'd already been considering diversifying into pigs. Pork prices were stable and I had unused acreage. I just hadn't pulled the trigger yet. Suddenly, the timing felt right. I submitted the proper paperwork, scheduled inspections, and hired a contractor to build a modest hog barn. It wasn't some ramshackle shed. It was fully compliant. Concrete floor, proper drainage, approved ventilation system, required distance from the property line. I made sure every single measurement was by the book. When the framing went up along my side of the fence line, legally set back, mind you, I noticed a lot of phone calls happening next door. Within a week, a county truck rolled up. The zoning officer walked around, checked the permits, measured distances, and finally shrugged. Everything's compliant, he said. They bought ag land. The barn was finished by early summer. A few weeks later, the pigs arrived. Not hundreds. I'm not running an industrial operation. 90 had to start. Enough to make it worthwhile, not enough to overwhelm the land. Anyone who's spent 5 minutes around pigs knows they are not delicate creatures. They grunt, they root, and they smell. That's part of livestock. Within days, I noticed changes next door. Windows stayed closed, outdoor gatherings stopped, the driveway music disappeared. That's the part that makes the whole thing work. They wanted you to be quiet, to stop farming, to make their view prettier. You didn't argue, you just started farming harder. Not out of spite, legally, within zoning, with permits and inspections. But the result was the same. The smell and noise they tried to escape followed them anyway because they moved to the wrong place. One evening, the father came over. He wasn't angry, just tight-lipped. "Is there any way you'd reconsider this?" he asked. "It's affecting our enjoyment of our property." I leaned against the fence and answered evenly, "I'm operating within zoning. This land's been farmed longer than either of us have been alive." "We didn't think it would be like this," he admitted. I couldn't help myself. "Did you read the zoning before you bought?" He didn't answer that. After that, there was silence between us. No more lectures, no more eye rolls. Just a growing tension every time the wind shifted. By midsummer, a real estate sign appeared in their yard. It didn't sell quickly. Turns out buyers hesitate when a small residential lot's sandwiched between active farms. They dropped the price once, then again. Eventually it sold, noticeably lower than what they'd paid. The new owners introduced themselves the first week. Local couple, both raised in farming families. The husband walked over, glanced at the barn, and grinned. "Smells like business," he said. "You running feeders or finishing?" We ended up talking for 20 minutes about feed ratios and market timing. The difference was night and day. I'm not pretending I expanded solely out of spite. The operation makes sense financially, but I also won't deny that I stopped feeling the need to shrink myself to accommodate someone who moved into farm country expecting a pastoral screensaver. The pigs are healthy, the barn runs smoothly, the new neighbors wave when I drive by, and sometimes we trade equipment for a weekend. Out here, agriculture isn't a hobby aesthetic, it's work. It's smell and noise and mud and early mornings. If someone buys land zoned for farming and then gets upset when farming happens, that's not my oversight to correct. Let's talk about who really won. Story 1 was silence's strategy. The dancer refused to apologize, so the OP refused to let her pretend. Half a beer on the seat, a smile, and 20 minutes of watching her pop up every time she sat down. She never looked back. She never acknowledged it, but she also never sat comfortably again. Story 2 was reality as mirror. Hannah spent years measuring people by what they showed. Lila showed nothing, so Hannah assumed she had nothing. When she realized the truth, it wasn't the money that stung. It was the fact that she'd been competing alone. Lila never even knew there was a game. But story 3 wins, not because of the pigs, though 90 head of hogs is its own kind of statement, but because of the paperwork. The OP didn't argue with the complaining neighbors. He just read the zoning code, filed the permits, and built a fully compliant hog barn. They wanted him to stop farming. He farmed harder. And when they finally sold at a loss, the new neighbors walked over and asked about feed ratios. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.